Hello and welcome to the next episode of No Lids, No Limits. This time we are without Kin, but we have a very special guest from CETEC, Mr. Taylor Wagen. Hey Taylor, how are you, sir?
Hi, Arek. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So we know each other from Shinton. You know, that's a mutual friend. The
Yeah.
gentleman you invited into your podcast. Talk a little bit about the friendship and all of the things you
Yeah.
achieved together. The one thing we have in common, we love motorcycles. So that's gotta be my first question to you. So how long have you been riding? Is it longer than you were working for CETEC?
No. It's I started. I think I was near 30, and it's a thing that I'd always wanted to do, but just never done. And at some point, my wife was like, "You should do the thing. It's the thing you want to do. Go get your license, start riding." So I did the whole motorcycle safety course where you ride like a trained bear in a parking lot. Doing little
Okay.
circles and learning to use the clutch and all these things. And then I went out and bought a 1988 BMW K75 as my first
Ooh,
motorcycle. And it was
okay.
like $1,500. And that was then that became my commuter. Now it was very, very dedicated. That like this is my vehicle. I'm not going to have a car and a motorcycle, and partially because this is 20 years ago. I was far more budget constrained. You're going to ride if it's cold. You're going to ride if it's hot. You're going to ride when it rains. You're going to ride, like all weather. Just that's how I'm getting around.
And you
I've
did
been
it?
doing it. Yeah, been
Oh
doing
my
it
God,
since.
man, you're committed. That's very nice. So what was your best trip so far on a motorcycle?
Ooh.
Is there anything? Oh,
That's a good one. So, um, Eric knows that I do these strange adventure motorcycle trips, and I meet a friend of mine who lives. He's in Spain now.
okay.
We've done a couple in Morocco.
Oh, nice.
We rented Harleys in Egypt and
Hmm.
went from like Luxor down to Alexandria and around. We've done Kenya
Hmm.
and we've done India from Delhi up into like the very edge of the Himalayas and around up there. And I think actually out in Morocco might be my favorite, where we tend to leave from Marrakesh, and we've done this twice with different routes, but you go up into the high Atlas, and
Hmm.
it's just crazy how different it is. So you start out on this, it's just Marrakesh, it's deserty, it's hot, and then you just start climbing and you leave cities and you're into like tiny villages. And by the time you're in the high Atlas, there's snow, it's cold. You are like a sight. There are strange people on motorcycles. You're trying to buy gas, and they bring it out in these water bottles. They know somebody who has gas, and they this little procession through the village. They try to find somebody who has gas in a water bottle, and it's amazing. So you end up like staying for lunch. I have we I've been offered as uh, will you marry my daughter? This has happened multiple times now.
Okay.
And this is surreal. You're on a motorcycle in Morocco with your friend, and he speaks Arabic. So there we are, and he's like, "Hey, they're wondering if we're married, if we can marry their daughters." No, I'm married. I have children. I have grandchildren.
Well, honey, I brought a little bit more from the trip. Are there any life lessons from those trips that you are utilizing in your business life as well? Is there anything like
Oh,
that?
that's a good question. There's a lot that I end up reflecting on, and maybe it just confirms things I'm already thinking. One, sometimes I think about what is the nature of poverty, what is the nature of progress, and how dependent we are, like the tide that floats society, and the difference between coming back to America and you get on board a plane and they're like, "Oh, would you like a drink?" And here's food and here's a warm towel and all these things. And just a day and a half ago, I was like up in a place where like you're really struggling to get enough calories to feed your children.
Yes.
And the amount of interdependency that this takes is extreme. It's not a thing that you do yourself. It's not like I make this happen. But ideally, you have a society where everybody contributes. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking back in the early 2000s, I worked, most of my time was spent, on a
Mhm.
very large distributor that did some manufacturing in the electronics industry. And that was my ERP world, is helping them do things. I remember thinking the net impact of my contributions to the global economy is maybe I have taken a couple hundredths of a penny off the price of storage,
Mhm.
because they sold a lot of disk drives. I was like, well, in a way, that is kind of what society is. We all go to work and we work real hard and we try to do things. And hopefully you make things a little bit less frictiony. Things happen a little bit better, and you lower costs and raise the level for for everyone.
for everyone. Yeah, yeah. This kind of reflects one of that movie that I really like. It's Pass It Forward, that you do, one kindness at the time, and
Yeah.
then everybody start doing this. So yeah, kind of this resonates this a little bit with me. Okay, so we started talking a little bit more about business. So let's go into CETEC ERP. Tell us a little bit about your story at CETEC, and then what is the next big thing that you're working on.
I started at CETEC in 1999, and at the time, I was hired as a trainer. I got in and got real curious about actually writing software. It
Okay.
turns out that was an interest. So I spent all my nights, and all my weekends, and I had a newborn, and my wife and I had moved to Texas for this job, and I just read programming books endlessly and started writing code, installed Linux on my laptop, just chasing the Unix bug, writing. And eventually, they're like, hey, you want to try writing something at work? And I flipped over and began to spend more and more of my time actually as a developer, scratching that itch. And the nice thing for that was you could kind of handle the customer problem, understand what they were doing, because that's where I started,
Hmm.
doing training, and then ultimately like understanding what do they need and how can we build a solution to fix that, and then being able to translate that into actually writing code. But it did kind of set me up in CTech as somebody who had both halves of that, like interfacing with the customer, spending a lot of time understanding what do they need, and then being able to do the translation into software. And Brent Barton, the other person who's been here for as long as I have, he has the kind of exact same path, except
Yeah.
he started on the technical side and decided he was very interested in the customer side. So between the two of us, we've now spent, I don't know, 27 years basically, chasing customer problems and trying to map some solution into software, and deal with that kind of process wise.
Yeah, and honestly, reading all the reviews that you have online from the customers, that's the one thing that they all kind of speak about, that how deeply you went into process with them, not like trying to
Mm.
just sell, this is what it is, and but go deeply, what do you need? How can we make it yours? So that's pretty nice thing that you guys are doing. And also, your solution seems like the really one of not that many that it's almost like a ready to be implemented at the customer side. So is this the kind of unique feature that you would say? Because I'm looking at all the big guys, and then, for example, the EMS business or the electronics in general, where I'm coming from, it's like a fringe of the business for them. For you, it's a major field, and the solution really feels like it's almost you know ready to go on day
Yeah.
one.
There's a couple accidents to that. I'd love to tell you it was like a big master plan, but like a lot of things, you kind of just you fall into it. So we did start as a legacy ERP provider with this massive old business basic code base. And the way you did ERP back then is you installed on a local server that would then you'd make changes, and they say, oh, we need to do this, so we need to do this. And so you make changes, and then they can never upgrade essentially without, getting a new server, getting the things over here, and then starting to translate all the changes back over, right? It becomes too much of a lift. So everybody's code falls further and further behind, and it's aging tech. Eventually it's not supported, it's a security disaster, etc. So we've been very pushy on trying to reduce customizations in favor of configurations,
Hmm.
because we can give an upgrade path for everybody, and they can have something that keeps, it's like a website ultimately is what we would like. When you
Yeah.
load, the news, it's not like, do you want to download the latest version of the news? It's like, no,
Right.
these are the new, stories today. It's just
Hmm.
always up to date. We like the software to work that way. So we work very hard on that. But we also recognize that there are changes people need. And so that's where our configuration, not customization, comes in. So we're
Hmm.
willing to provide a little bit of boundaries, um, on some things where it's like, we're gonna get an NCR module whether you want it or not. You don't have to use it, but it's gonna be there.
Hmm.
But then within that NCR module, you can change your workflow states. You can add fields. You can do all these things to customize it and make it your own. So there's some structure, some bones, but then all the things that we think are likely to be changed, we try to make changeable within that walled garden. And that's our way of trying to make sure that we wouldn't break people in their ability to have continual upgrades. The thing that it actually solved for us, strangely, was the ability to take a smaller customer. Because now it is that you have this out of the box thing that you can tweak and you can change based on how much budget you have, what your needs are, so on and so forth. And if the defaults are reasonable, you may be able to say, hey, man, day one, that's exactly what I want. I'm very happy. And that becomes now a path for a company with 25 employees to say, we can have all of these processes and features, outside of Excel, native inside our ERP system, as though we were a very large company. And that's been fantastic. It's actually worked very well for us. Why do we play in the EMS area, the
Mhm.
electronics manufacturing and all that? We started as a system for electronics distributors. And all the distributors chased value add services. So these distributors were doing things to add margin, like we can do kitting for you.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as you say kitting, now we have to have a BOM structure. The CETEC back in the 80s kind of expanded into these little manufacturing areas that an EMS company needs without really intending to do that. And then the feature that I think has been the most useful, especially in the supply chain disruption we've had, is the ability to say this capacitor that's specified in the BOM could be swapped for these other two like capacitors by a different manufacturer as long as they're
Mhm.
functionally equivalent. You can specify those into a group and use whichever one you have. We call that a
Mhm.
part spec group. And believe it or not, that was never intended to be an electronics feature. We created that for a downhole oil tools manufacturer because they had different grades of steel. And the engineer was saying, I have steel that's rated for pressure up to blank and temperature up to blank, and I need it to be at least this. But if it exceeds it, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And it might be that I have some left over from a previous job. So how do I tell these people on the floor that they could use one of those? And it's like, we, did a bunch of design, worked out this whole thing, came back to the guy and he's like, oh, that's brilliant. It'll work. And at some point I had a conversation with Chintin about this. He was
Mhm.
talking about, how do we do this? We have this feature. He's like, it'll work. And
Yeah.
that we have continued to build out for specifically some electronics cases, but that's where it came from.
And then you build it out, and also, CQ is fully integrated with CTEC. So the
Yeah.
customer can just within one click, all the data can be easily pulled in. So
Yeah.
that's also one of the unique features that you're offering.
And they did
A lot
they
of
did a great job with that.
Yeah, a lot of customers are using that specific feature, or would you say was this a big selling point in the States?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, if you're using CalcuQuote, um, to have something that ready-made lets you kind of leverage a lot of the benefits of CalcuQuote,
Mhm.
and that is frictionless on how that data passes back and forth. I think that's super compelling.
To me, the best thing ever is that once you load the BOM from the CQ side, you can really upload this into CTEC, and
Yeah,
it's really a milestone that you can overcome within one click. So that's hats off to you guys for making
yeah, that
that
pushes straight up.
that implementation. Yeah. And then you mentioned earlier a little bit about the EMSs that are working on the Excels. Well, I would say that's a story that I see many times in especially the smaller EMSs in my
Mm,
region. And then to convince them to jumping over to an ERP, it's not that easy because we have an Excel spreadsheet, we want to use it, and then you're giving them this magnificent tool, but then the cost and everything. So can we talk a little bit about the cost and how are you playing with the customer that are only using Excel
yeah.
spreadsheet, not a big sky high budgets and everything? How does that
Yeah,
work?
I read this somewhere that the majority of who does ERP conversions or installs are actually people not switching systems. They're people actually getting their first system. That's apparently the numbers on this. And that somebody with like an accounting system and a bunch of Excel spreadsheets realizing they have now outgrown it and now they have to try to patch all that data into some new ERP system. So it's not an uncommon problem. For us, the pricing is very easy to solve because we have avoided a lot of the configuration, the install difficulty. I
Mhm.
can spin you up an instance. It's on the cloud. You can go to our website, say free trial, put your credit card in, and it's no longer a free trial. Now it's like a full instance. You can run on that forever, and it'll take you about 2 minutes. So that part's very easy. The process figuring that stuff out is kind of hard. We do our best to push as much of that onto the website. You don't even have to talk to us if you don't want to. You can watch all these videos and go, but you're probably going to want to. You probably want somebody to walk you through and get you set up well. But the data is very hard. That's one of the bigger problems, getting your data organized and put into the system. So those are the real costs. But system cost, the thing that I wouldn't talk about is system cost. We put our pricing online. It's $50 a user. And you want a support plan, it's for the company. It's all very cheap. You think about like what people spend on, like, what does an employee cost?
Mhm.
An employee is remarkably expensive, actually, and you think about like what is that with their salary plus all the other ancillary taxes and benefits and so on and so forth. An ERP system, at least in our world, is fractional. It's going to be a couple hundred to a couple thousand in a month. And so the ROI for us on like what do we have to achieve to make that case is is pretty easy.
Hmm.
The harder part is going to be having somebody maybe on the education side understand as you leave all these spreadsheets to have all these processes maybe you haven't even encountered yet that you're going
Yeah.
to encounter in 3 months and 6 months. Who's maintaining these spreadsheets? Do you really have all this stuff? And does it fit? There are some cases where people will build a process in Excel not knowing what they're going to encounter later on, and they're actually building a process that solves one problem now and creates 10 later. Um, and that's one thing we try to do is like, hey, this one is like, it'll grow with you for a long time. These processes are here and it has the things in a way that will scale. And it is just a much easier path.
And will be just like one instance where no one ever encountered this again, and they still use the processes.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a lot of the information online. There is a lot of data that you're posting on YouTube, on your website, that the customers and the people interested in the ERP can really learn from, together with all the workflow, which for me was just mind blowing. How much data you can just source directly and learn about the product. And on top of that, you have this CETEC University that
Yeah.
you give also
Yeah.
the access for the people to learn. I went through that as well. And for me, the coolest thing ever on that CETEC University was working hours. As not a native, I didn't really know what that means. I thought it was your working hours of the office. But then when I realized that I can just click and go directly into a session on a specific topic, I have never seen anything like it. So yeah, it's a real cool feature.
Uh,
So thank you very much for that. You mentioned that it's more customers going for the first ERP rather than changing it? Is it because it's so hard, or it's like a medical application that I designed 20 years ago and I don't want to change the component, even though it's better, faster, cheaper? Hats off to Kin on this one. But it's been done in the design. I have this all the approval, so I don't want to do it. Is this what you would say?
I would say probably more of our customers are swapping from a system than from QuickBooks. They have something, but if you were to say which particular ERP, then QuickBooks would probably win one of these like, Sage or Zero or something like that.
Yeah.
I think the bulk of our customers have some system, and usually something has happened.
Mm.
They got squeezed on a contract negotiation where they got a great low introductory price, and then 3 years in, the salesperson is back, and now that you're on his system, he can basically just write the rules and tell you what the price is going to be. And so, like, we can't pay that, or we don't want to pay that. Let's see what else is out there. And that's fantastic because they run across us, and our pricing is going to be very upfront. It's on the website. We're not negotiating about it. We're not here to figure out what you can pay, and that helps on the trust side, right? And you're just gonna have to fight getting data out of the old system. You also have some people who are just on a system that's so old, and then somebody new takes over the company, and they're like, "What are we doing? How on earth are you doing this? This is terrible. Look at all the costs you have around this." And they're like, "I don't know. We just never changed it." We get a lot of both of those. I mean, then you mentioned medical. So medical
Yeah.
and in aerospace, those two fields, they're very similar because they're very regulated. They're much more likely to jump into an ERP system earlier because they have to have full traceability. They have to be able to handle a recall. There's a bad component. Find me every finished good that have that, and we need to issue a recall. And that's very hard to do with spreadsheets, honestly, to have full traceability or like serialization.
Yeah.
So they move into ERP quick.
And in terms of the implementation, if you're looking at some different customers that you had, what was the, average time on the implementation, smaller size EMS and mid-size EMS?
I think implementation is very related to company size, also company willpower. I'm taking a company live right now on a 2.5 month time frame
Okay. That's
because
pretty
they have a hard exit on their existing ERP system.
hmm
They lose access on a date, and so we have to be converted before that. So they're very motivated.
hmm
They are spending the time to learn, like, how are you gonna do that in CTech? They're grabbing all the data they can and loading it in, and it's going remarkably smoothly. And there's about 40, 50 people in that company, so it's not extremely large. If that was a 400 to 600 person company, it'd be a martyr problem to get everybody on the same page, to uncover what everybody's actually doing. Those become projects that you'd measure in 9 months to 3 years. But for a smaller company with strong leadership involvement, if there's a sense of urgency, we have done it in as little as 4 weeks. We
wow.
prefer somewhere in the 3 to 4 month period, but it really depends a lot on the situation of the company itself, and even if they can get their data.
Yeah, of course, garbage in, garbage out. We fully understand, the the quality it needs on the book. Okay, and now the next step is really to go into Europe. That's why we're all trying to align and seeing the impact. So is this an interesting market for you? What are you looking for into this?
It's a big unknown to me. We have engaged with customers in the UK and a
Mhm.
few in Switzerland. We just have done nothing in Europe. We've never marketed outside of the US and Canada. So we have accidentally accumulated some customers in Asia Pacific and Middle East and Africa. Quite honestly, I don't know what I don't know. I'm not sure what to expect.
Mission Europe, it will be great. It was a great conversation with you, Taylor. Thank you very much for your time. It's highly appreciated to talk to you about the product and how it rolls out in Europe. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Bye bye.